Today I wanted to talk about some of the most dementedly intelligent beings in all of Warhammer 40K, starting off with the archons. The archons of the Drukhari Cabal are the true lords of Kamara. They sit at the apex of the Dark Eldar hierarchy that controls the Dark City and the labyrinthian realm of the Drukhari portion of the Webway. Archons tend to be the tallest and most elegant of their species. Their alabaster skin is corpse-like in appearance, for there is no true sunlight within their shadowy realms. Their athletic physiques are lined with whipcord muscle, honed and enhanced until they are superior to even that of their craft-world cousins. They stride through the fires of battle with the confidence and poise of a demigod, but their magnificence is only skin-deep. Viewed with witch sight, Dark Eldar are repugnant monsters. The flesh of their soulless selves is gnarled and cadaverous, while their eyes glow with an icy and maleficent hatred for all living things. Each one of these dark leaders is a potent foe on the battlefield, but he has attained his position not merely through martial prowess in the art of war and violence, but through consistently emerging as the victor in the most difficult game of all, the Byzantine intrigues that govern all things in the heart of the Dark City. Only the most insidious survive long enough to kill their way to the top. In both word and deed, each archon is as poisonous as a serpent. Their minds are labyrinthian as the darkest reaches of the Webway. Such traits are necessary, for to sit at the very peak of power is to make oneself a prominent target indeed. Though every archon is a conceited megalomaniac, convinced of his own mental and physical superiority over all other beings, he will retain his position as an overlord of Kamara for only as long as he could stave off the endless coups and assassination attempts of his rivals, enemies, and his own Drakon lieutenants. One false move in the upper echelons of the Dark City is always inevitably fatal. And so all archons have an uncanny ability to predict the motions and schemes of others, and take great delight in turning their rivals' traps against them in bloody and often spectacular ways. Despite the elaborate network of alliances within the Dark City, the overlords of the Cabals run rings around those who seek to beat them at this deadly game. The endless ambitions of their underlings keep an archon's paranoia as sharp as his own blade, and so it is in the service of treachery that all archons truly excel. Their strategy stretching across the millennia as centuries-old plots come to fruition. It is said by some that the archons of the Drukhari could even teach Tzeentch, the Lord of Change, a thing or two about plotting for the long term. Some of the archons, known as the Lords of Twilight, who govern from the highest spires of Kamara, even claim to have seized their throne in the time before the fall of the Eldar. These eldest of archons view the rest of their species with contempt, as little better than squabbling children. The Lords of Twilight do not suffer fools willingly. A single misstep by one of their underlings in protocol may rouse an archon to murderous wrath. In matters of maintaining their cabal's hierarchy, archons have been known to even prefer solutions that leave everyone less well off, if only to spite them. Yet reveling in the depths of suffering and madness for an eternity eventually extracts a prize. Over the long Terran years that they have held the reins of power, or clawed their way up to hold this lofty position, the archons of the Dark Eldar have enjoyed the pain of others for so long as only a true atrocity invigorates them. Archons regularly lead full-scale planetary raids for their cabals, as drinking in the agony of an entire planet is the only way they can regenerate themselves. Thousands of slaves must be sacrificed for the eldest archons every single night, and this still may not be enough to make the oldest and most corrupt look youthful once more. As a result, Eldar archons usually cover their black-veined faces with masks. Some archons' masks are stylized and beautiful. Others are bloody, alien, and terrible, fashioned from the flayed flesh of their rivals' faces. When the time comes for battle, an archon will first stop at the weapons museum, savoring the process of selecting which of the baleful technologies of the Dark City, a soul trap, agonizers, or shadow fields, he will use to visit terror and pain upon the unwitting. Some archons choose a different array of armaments for each engagement, indulging in the variety at their disposal. Others have used the same tool of slaughter for years, decades, or even centuries, and continually find new ways to induce suffering with their favorite implements. Almost all archons surround themselves with a court of favored retainers, pets, and bodyguards, from the looming serpentine mercenaries known as slits, to packs of drooling, fang-mauled orguls from the haunted pyramids of Dome. Such a retinue can be as varied as the tools in the Overlord's torture chamber. Currently the most powerful archon is Supreme Overlord Azurveil Vect, He is the ruler of the Cabal of the Black Heart, the oldest and greatest of his kind. It was Vect who rose from his mundane life as a young warrior slave to bring the old order of the Dark Eldar nobility crashing down and instituted the Kabbalite system. So complete is Vect's stranglehold upon Kamara that none of these highly placed subordinate archons dare challenge the Overlord's supremacy in anything but the most private dreams or fantasies. Even then, they do so with caution, for it is said that Vect knows well the scent of treachery and reads the minds of lesser mortals like an open book. Vect has also come the closest to fulfilling every archon's greatest desire, to become one of the Dark Muses. Now, we can't talk about dementedly intelligent beings without talking about someone from the Adeptus mechanicus. Let's take a look at the magos dominus. Across the countless battlefields of the galaxy, there is one servant of the Omnissiah that is ever vigilant for the lost war treasures they can pluck from the corpses of the worlds that they conquer. Their minds boil hot with data, and their spines are bent under the immense weight of knowledge they have torn from unwilling victims. Despite their crooked appearance, these warrior magi are amongst the deadliest and most determined of all of the Omnissiah servants. It is the Tech Priest Dominus who see the armies of the Unlightened as little more than specimens upon which they can demonstrate the supremacy of the machine god. Alien, heretic, and traitor alike are considered mere vermin, ready to be exterminated with the most advanced weaponry ever devised by man. During the Horus Heresy, the Magos Dominus was the master of the arts of the Legio Cybernetica, a sect of the priesthood of Mars which was granted the right to create and control the battle automatons of the Imperium. This means that a Mago Dominus is not only responsible for the Skitarii legions, but also for the Electro Priest and Catapharan battle servitors that make up the Adeptus Mechanicus battle congregation. So powerful are these individuals that they are considered the shapers of destruction, the masters of the cult Mechanicus that can reduce entire worlds to ruin. They can command a city to be broken down until not a single rock creep brick rests upon another, or order an entire race eradicated and expunged from the history books. Now, these feats are not accomplished through diplomacy, but via the relentless and merciless application of firepower. The extreme power of the Tech Priest Dominus is bestowed only to those of the cult Mechanicus with a true talent for war, those who believe in the supremacy of the machine god and will prove it at every opportunity they get. Though they are likely to hail from the laboratories of a biologist as they are from the war halls of a magi militarum, each is an expert in weapon arcana. To them, the secrets of the battlefield are laid bare. Every bullet's ballistic trajectory, every last pack's current capacity, every battle engine's optimal firing solution, even the price of Dogecoin flickers in their mind's eye. They feast on raw data and cerebral stimulants, allowing them to coordinate frontline tactics and chant war psalms from their Vox arrays. To augment their own formidable weaponry, the contents of the vast vaults of the Forge Worlds are available to the Tech Priest Dominus. It allows them to carry war relics capable of extraordinary feats of destruction. And it's these powerful weapons of mass destruction and the control of the Skitarii Legion which makes most Magi Dominus forego a higher political power within the priesthood. Instead of pursuing the power that comes with controlling an entire Forge World, the Magos Dominus instead chooses to plead fealty to a Magos Prime, which is equivalent to a planetary governor within the Adeptus Mechanicus. They do this in exchange for the immediate control of a Skitarii Legion. This means that on one Forge World, there could be dozens of Magi Dominus, each one with a mighty army that not only defends the planet from invaders, but also from tech priests that might attempt to organize a coup. This shaky balance is juggled on every planet controlled by the priesthood, and it is the Tech Priest Dominus' job to protect the quest for knowledge first and foremost with fire and sword. On the battlefield, the Tech Priest Dominus is one of the deadliest warriors of the Omnissiah. Everything he possesses can be used as a lethal weapon, from the obviously dangerous like the Archaeotech pistol and the Volkite Serpenta, both ranged weapons that can trace their design to the dark age of technology, to augury sensors designed to pinpoint the most lethal shot within a millisecond of analysis. Even the cyber familiars the Magos Dominus takes with him to the field are battle-hardened minion drones, ready to enhance their master's firepower or fight in his place. For close combat, the Magos Dominus usually carries some sacred power weapon crafted by ancient weaponsmiths and capable of tearing the toughest enemies apart. None are safe when the Tech Priest Dominus marches into war. With the power to tear the machine spirit from any of his servants, this Mago strikes fear even amongst his own ranks. Now let's move on to another dementedly intelligent race, which is the Necrons, but specifically a character named Orikan the Diviner. In the 40K universe, divination, or the ability to peer into the future, is a well-established practice amongst the psychically powerful races. Seers, librarians, even weird boys have the ability to gain knowledge of future events, all thanks to their warp powers. But when it comes to the Necrons, these undead warriors have no psychic powers like the other races in the galaxy. Instead, it falls to the Necron chronomancers and astromancers. These are types of Necron cryptechs or engineers that are using their highly advanced knowledge of science and technology to manipulate the universe's fundamental forces and decipher future events with just as much accuracy as any psyker. And the most powerful and infamous of these chronomancers is Orikan the Diviner. Orikan possesses a vast swath of arcane sciences that allow him to calculate future events from the patterns of the stars. He has held on to this seemingly magical power for nearly 60 million years. Orikan was the primary astromancer of the ancient Necron-tier empire. This is before they were even Necrons. His powers were reserved for the ruling Triarch, making him one of the Silent King's most trusted advisors. Unfortunately, his counsel was ignored when it mattered most. During the War in Heaven, Orikan foresaw the disaster of the biotransference process. He knew that every Necron-tier would lose their soul in exchange for immortality. He was the only member of the Silent King's court to oppose the Catan known as the Deceiver's proposal. When the bargain was struck and the Necron-tier entered the massive furnaces, Orikan submitted himself to the same process. He became one of the undying Necrons, giving up his soul in solidarity with his people. Inside his new android body of living metal, Orikan's already reality-bending powers have only expanded, being freed from the limitations of his old decaying flesh. So grand are his powers that he knew of the fall of the Eldar, the rise of man, the Horus Heresy, even the coming of the Tyranids many thousands of Terran years before they came to pass. Through careful study and scrutiny, Orikan can even divine lesser occurrences, like the movement of fleets, the destinies of individuals, even the strategies undertaken by campaigning armies. These events, not important enough to reshape the galaxy, but the foreknowledge of which can dramatically change the fortunes of the beholder. Though they make use of his laborious studies, few amongst Orikan's peers truly trust him. This is not altogether due to his skills, for all cryptechs are capable of techno-sorceries that completely defy belief. The unease that Orikan provokes is due chiefly to the mocking scorn with which he treats the nobility of every rank, and to the knowing gleam in his eyes that implies that he is party to a joke that no other person can perceive. And these overlords would like nothing more than to see Orikan punished for his quiet insolence. However, not only is such a course of action unwise, as the benefits of being able to call upon Orikan's skills greatly outweighs any offense caused by him, it is also entirely impossible. Orikan knows the plans of his rivals and his enemies long before they do, and it is child's play for him to exploit such schemes to his personal advantage, an alteration that more often than not involves the fatal outcome for the original plotter. And although his skills are great, Orikan's predictions are not flawless. Unforeseen events can change his calculations, completely wiping out and replacing his prophesized timeline. Warp travel is a consistent aggravation, as its chaotic flow seems to delight in defying his predictions. Under such circumstances, in order to preserve his plans and reputation, Orikan is forced to employ a closely guarded set of chronomantic abilities. His mastery over the flow of time is such that he could actually walk backwards into his own past. He emerges at a point from which he can set his prophesized version of the future back on track, normally by having the interfering factor destroyed in some manner. These skills are limited, however, and he can't travel back in time as he pleases. An example of these powers in action occurred during the Helios 6 incident, when the Imperial Navy dockyards of Helios 6 should have never survived the onset of Walk's Skullcracker, and they did so only by the inconvenient interruption of the meddlesome Silver Skull 4th Company. But by retroactively arranging for the Space Marines to be ambushed and nearly wiped out by the Necron forces some solar weeks earlier, Orikan ensured that the destruction of Helios 6 ultimately occurred as first foreseen. Thus were the Necrons able to reclaim much of the surrounding sector, but more importantly, Orikan's reputation was kept intact. However, Orikan has learned not to manipulate events like this so often, for in his meddling, it can birth all manner of unforeseen events. As a direct result of Helios 6, no less than 5 Space Marine chapters, including the Death Spectres, the Howling Griffins, and the remainder of the Silver Skulls, descended upon the Lazar system to take revenge, utterly destroying the tomb world from whence Orikan's original commission had come from. In this case, Orikan's culpability in the disaster remains a secret, but it could have easily gone otherwise. Orikan takes great care to keep his machinations hidden from his peers. Though chronomancy is a science practiced by many cryptechs, no other is remotely capable of Orikan's feat, something that would increase 100-fold the suspicion in which he is held. And suspicion is the last thing Orikan needs at this moment, for 1,000 millennia of planning and preparation is about to come to fruition, for once the stars are in a proper alignment, Orikan will finally embrace his true destiny. Now I want to talk about the Tau Empire on this list, however I don't want to just cover the ethereal because I've done that in another deep dive. What I wanted to do is cover the Tau aircast. When we listen to or read the lore of the Tau Empire, it's easy for us to think of what the Xeno race looks like because of the miniature line and the great artwork that has been established. But what most of us picture in our minds is actually only a very specific sub-faction of the entire race. In fact, the Tau Empire is made up of 5 distinct sub-races, each one of which is biologically very different than each other. We are familiar with the short, stocky Tau that make up the Firecast, and also the tall and elegant Tau that are referred to as ethereals. But one of the most elusive sub-races in the entire Empire are the Tau that make up the Aircast. The Tau Aircast has always been the most physically different and specialized subclass of the entire race. Even when the species was nothing more than a bunch of primitive tribesmen warring amongst each other and struggling to survive on their homeworld of Tau, the Aircast stood out as almost a completely different species. They had long, gangling limbs that stretched them high above the rest of their peers, and they possessed membranous wings, which allowed them to glide on the changing air currents of the planet. After the unification of the species by the ethereals, they played a vital role as a messenger for the greater good. Fast forward to today's era, and they still have the vestigial remains of these membrane-like wings that once helped them fly in the sky, but are now the warriors in charge of piloting the merchant and Tau protection fleets of the Empire. And as soon as the Tau Empire left their homeworld and began to explore the cosmos, the Aircast made space their permanent home. And throughout the many years of adapting to this lifestyle of zero gravity, and maybe even because of selective breeding, the Aircast developed long, hollowed bones that made it easier for them to maneuver through their ships, but also altered their bodies to be even taller and stranger looking than the rest of their brethren. At this point, the Aircast has lost so much bone density and muscle mass that they struggle to live on any sort of environment with significant gravitic pressure. Because of this, they have become the least encountered of the Tau caste, even amongst their own kind, earning them the nickname of the Invisible Caste. However, despite this enigmatic lifestyle, the Aircast is vital to everyday life for the greater good. Without them, the transportation of goods and services would fall apart, and their strict and well-organized economy would crumble. And because of how important the protection of these merchant ships became, the Aircast inevitably developed into a heavily armed and armored fleet. They quickly learned how to defend themselves from the many pirates and hostile aliens that traveled the stars and refused to accept the teachings of the greater good. The first major defeat and a wake-up call came during the Damocles Gulf Crusade, when the vessels of the Aircast were outgunned and lacked the needed maneuverability to defeat the Imperial Navy. At that point, the entire Aircast had an overhaul that was sanctioned by the Ethereals. Tau High Command ordered a major program of research and development which initiated a massive naval construction program known as the Core Orvesh Initiative. The initiative would develop new starships designed solely for military use, built with the newest Tau technology, and constructed around the tactical perimeters informed by the costly losses already taken in battle. Thus, the Tau Protection Fleet became a military organization with the goal of total air superiority. Since then, teams of Aircast combat craft sweep through the skies of almost every single battlefield the Firecast fights upon. Fighter and bomber teams are fully integrated into the combat strategies of the Tau military, coordinated centrally by coalition-level command elements and working in perfect concert with the ground forces of the Firecast. Their efforts ensure that the ground-based cadres can maneuver freely, pursuing their own objectives without fear of attack from on high. Now nearly all of the Tau campaigns begin with a massive Aircast combat deployment. Each team of fighters or bombers is tasked with achieving specific objectives, and they are provided with ample support to achieve their goals in optimal time. Teams of Razor Shark strike fighters switch between high-altitude dogfights and ground attack runs, fearlessly scouring the skies of monstrous beasts or obliterating the war engines of the enemy. While these Razor Shark teams eliminate priority threats, whole contingents of Sunshark bombers plunge low to perform daring bombing runs against key enemy installations. Airfields, generators, flak batteries, and command assets are pounded into submissions by energized ordnances to pave the way for a full-fledged ground assault by the Firecast. Now aircast pilots have become the most respected and feared air combatants on any battlefield. They display incredible selflessness, braving unbelievable odds to destroy their targets. They will gladly glide between the building-sized tendrils of a Tyranid hive ship or dare the drumming fire of a Space Marine hunter squadron, stoically accepting their casualties as a sacrifice to the greater good. Although confined to their flying machines and orbital platforms, an aircast pilot willingly lays his life on the line for the survival of the rest of the Empire. Still, the Tau do not believe in selfless martyrdom. Their air groups never commit without a coherent plan and a clear target, and they quickly pull out if it becomes apparent that no amount of determination or technology is going to win them the day. Such judgments are left up to the pilots themselves, Tau commanders relying upon the experience and wisdom of their flight crew in the field. Such trust is well placed. The pilots of the aircast are born into this role, biologically adapted to flight thanks to their willowy frames. And when not in battle, the aircast resides in massive floating fortresses called Tashiro. These fortress stations are positioned in deep space between their subworlds and have enough thrust to maintain a permanent position resisting any gravitational drift. They also vary in size, with some being so large that they are considered orbital cities, permanent habitats for the aircast. As the Tau Empire continues to expand across the galaxy, more aircast cities are being built, creating a massive web of outposts for the fleets of the greater good, and ensuring the survival of the Tau race. It's further proof that without the aircast, the Empire would fall short in their burgeoning expansion. And finally, let's end things with my favorite faction, the Orcs. Let's talk about the dementedly intelligent mech. Although the majority of the Orc race appears to be brutal and instinctive in nature, the reality is that the average Orc possesses a low level of cunning, specifically designed to make them extremely deadly in combat. Orcs are not dumb. Each and every greenskin has a grasp of rudimentary technology at an instinctual level, meaning that just like a human baby is born with a natural ability to breathe, the average Orc knows how to maintain a Shuda or even a rocket pack as soon as it emerges from its spore sac. This incredible ability was hard-coded into the Orc's genetic makeup by the Old Ones who created the Orcs, although they called them the Krork. This basic mechanical aptitude possessed by the greenskins is one of the many reasons why the species has been so successful on countless battlefields. The greenskins are adaptable and mobile like no other race. While humans take years to educate their soldiers, an Orc boy is fully capable of waging war within minutes. To make the Orcs even more frightfully efficient warmongers, there exists a type of Orc within the greenskin ranks that possesses a stronger understanding of the building blocks of technology. These mechanically inclined Orcs are commonly known as mech boys, sometimes referred to as mechaniacs or simply mechs. These strange Orcs are blessed with a greater understanding of how to modify elaborate machinery, and also an instinctive willingness to put their skills to use regardless of how risky the modifications will be. Mechs will gladly remove a lock to make a Shuda more deadlier, or overcharge an engine in order to make it go faster. But both conversions have the potential to kill the mech or even the user, but to this odd boy, the thrill of learning something new outweighs the risk. Along with their mechanical and engineering prowess, mech boys also have a knack for assessing the nature, the use, and the value of a given piece of scrap or hardware at a glance. They have been known to break apart abandoned yet functioning vehicles or weapons in order to get the part of the machine that can be used to make things deadlier. Thanks to this keen eye, they excel at using these salvaged and recycled materials to create the improbable devices clamored over by the boys, knobs, and war bosses alike. One of the most common sights after a devastating battle is an Orc mech accompanied by a retinue of a dozen or so Gretchen looting the battlefield, collecting enemy weapons as well as tearing down the foe's wrecked vehicles and salvaging the good bits. This is obviously a dangerous task, not just because the mech is all alone in the battlefield, but much of the debris is in the brink of exploding or in the process of leaking out toxic or radioactive chemicals. All of these things are of no concern to the mech boys, as he is focused on bringing these items back to his mech shop. Orc mech boys always have a designated area of work within the greenskin settlements. The wisest Orcs stay away from these areas, as explosions and deadly projectiles are common. But that's not to say that an Orc mech is unpopular within the Orc tribe. A mech boy that has earned the reputation of building shootier Shudas or faster bikes will eventually open up a mech shop where his lethal inventions may be purchased for teeth, the common Orc currency. The sounds of sawing, hammering, and the occasional explosion will be heard coming from the mech shop. A mech's tools are almost as terrifying as the weapons he creates. They possess massive spanners, rivet guns, welders, cutting torches, hammers, and crude saws. Each one fits the callous hands of their creator and withstands its constant use and abuse. In their motor pools, workshops, and foundries, mechs gleefully toil away in a cloud of cigar smoke, oil mist, exhaust fumes, and fine metal dust, attended to by small armies of Gretchen servants, tasked with fetching tools, holding parts, and applying lubrication and adhesive. In these clamorous and noisome environments, mech boys and their assistants turn out the countless shoota, slugga, stick bombs, bits of armor, and other war gear required to feed the ravenous orc war machine. Mech boys are also driven by a competitive nature of creation. They are constantly tinkering with and customizing their war gear to make their creations twice as deadly as the other mech boys. When these demented minds compete with each other, the result is some of the most terrifying and dangerous war machines that the galaxy has ever seen. Many of these competitions have broken out to an all-out war, where the mechs supply their factions with destructive gear and send them out to the rival mech shops to wreak havoc. As more and more orcs hear about the fight, they flock to the mech shops, searching for a proper war. These tribal civil wars will continue until one faction is utterly eliminated, or the rival mech is killed, oftentimes by his own creation. There have been tales of mechs succumbing to their own creative hubris and fabricating a weapon so volatile it explodes right in their face. Another one of these stories is how a mech entombed his Gretchen servants inside the chassis of Killikans, only to have the army of walkers turn on the abusive mech and tear him apart limb from limb. Sadly, because of this infighting, the majority of new orc technology will never be seen by the Imperium or any other race of the galaxy. Instead, the creative genius of a mech will always be lost amongst the constant clashing between rival clans. In this way, the obsession with the mechanical has prevented many orc walls from forming. The orc technology that has been captured in battle and examined by the Adeptus mechanicus defies all description and classification. Guided by each individual mech boy's particular vision, no two pieces of orc equipment are alike. They show no signs of standardization or mass production, and vary so widely in their construction, design, and makeup as to make each piece of equipment essentially unique. As far as any of the learned magos of the priesthood of Mars can determine, the only commonality amongst the orc technology is that every shoota, truck, lava, and suit of mega armor seems to be nothing more than a random collection of scrap parts, gubbins, and metal plates patched together in a random fashion that simply should not function as advanced technology. And yet somehow the orcs' ramshackle vehicles run. Their terrifyingly crude flyers stay in the air despite lacking any kind of aerodynamic qualities, and their weapons fire shattering bursts of slugs, or disgorge gouts of flame, plasma, or other types of energy, despite being seemingly nothing more than a collection of flammable junk. Because of these absurd qualities of orc technology, the mech boys are a crucial part of any proper war. An orc mech is one of those odd boys that will always find a place within an orc clan or tribe. Their position within the hierarchy of orc society is also very unique. While mechs still follow the traditional values of might makes right, for many mech boys, the value of their skills outweighs their prowess on the battlefield. This doesn't mean that an orc mech is weak compared to other orcs. Mech boys have to be tough in order to secure their creations. If a loudmouth orc enters a mech shop thinking he can steal the best weapon, he will more than likely get a buzzsaw to the throat, or be zapped to dust by a mech's custom Mega Blaster. However, every now and then a slightly cunning orc knob or boss will realize that it's better to protect the mech from other orcs and allow him to keep creating deadlier weapons for the clan, rather than stomping his throat for one measly custom shooter. This is why mech boys, or even whole teams of mechs, fall under the protection of a war boss and accompany them into battle, making sure to repair any broken pieces from their warlord's favorite battle wagon, while simultaneously profiting from the best loot after the boss has had his fun. Teams of mech boys have always been reported fighting alongside the deadliest orc wars. A wise orc warlord will always have his odd boys creating terrifying vehicles, artillery pieces, and weapons common to an orc army. Mech boys are also in charge of securing resource lines and tapping into stolen energy grids as the green tide stomps across a planet. Mechs will often improve resource extractions for most worlds, as they know exactly what to tear down in order to drill for more oil or novocharge a power plant. Unfortunately for the world, the fuel will most likely go to killing the previous inhabitants, and since the orcs care little about protecting the environment, the ecosystem will soon collapse. At some point, every mech boy will get tired of following orders and test the war boss's might. That war boss that can't put a mech boy in place with a proper beating will give rise to a Big Mech. These Big Mechs secure their place as new bosses after striking down any knobs still loyal to the old regime. Like all other orcs, a Big Mech will get much bigger and stronger than a normal boy, and will boss around a retinue of not only Gretchen, but lower-ranking mech boys. These teams of mechs will build bigger and shootier technology, like Gorkanauts and Morkanauts, as well as the lethal Stompas. They will either lead their own walls, or sell their skills to other clans. Orc speed freaks are always willing to hire a Big Mech who promises to make faster smoke-belching contraptions. The Evil Sun's clan always has at least a couple of mech tribes to satisfy their need for speed. Members of the Bad Moon clan will always toss their teeth towards a wandering band of mechs in exchange for snazzier guns. And the Dead Skull clans always welcome these traveling mechs, selling their latest stolen loot. Every single interaction will result in conflict for the Big Mech, but if he's tough enough, eventually the Big Mech will rally enough orcs from different clans under his banner. These mechs are known as mech bosses, and instead of leading a team of mechs into battle, they will launch entire earth-breaking walls. These mech boss armies will look very similar to regular orc walls. That is until the boss's personal retinue of mega-armored knobs, death dreads, and cyborg orcs tear through the battlefield. The mech guns that accompany a mech boss can even rival the firepower of the Tau Empire, because half the time they're stolen from the Tau Firecast. And then there's the mech boss himself, which is usually a towering green skin covered in armor plating and showing off his latest inventions, augmented with kill saws, power claws, shock attack guns, custom force fields, and so much more. These monstrosities even shadow the mega dreads on the battlefield. The most infamous of all the mech boy weapons is the shock attack gun, a bizarre device capable of opening a hole in the very fabric of space-time. This awesome power is used not to advance science or to revolutionize travel, but to fire warp-crazed snotlings into the enemy. This strange creation is a great example of how deeply the mech's affinity for technology runs, but also how rubbish they are at using it for anything other than short-sighted destruction. The shock attack gun works by projecting a narrow force field tunnel through a small portion of the warp. How it manages this is a mystery to anyone other than its creator, but the destructive potential of such a technological monster is considerable. The entrance to this tunnel opens up at the front of the gun, and the exit point is created wherever the operator aims it. It is possible, in fact encouraged, for living creatures to travel down the tunnel and leave at the exit point. Unfortunately, it is fairly common for the complex device to fail, resulting in the messy death of those inside as the field implodes. Even if the field does maintain its integrity, the journey through the tunnel is extremely disturbing, for those within are surrounded on all sides by the horrific demonic creatures of the living warp. Orcs are not exactly afraid of demonic creatures, but find them unnatural in the nastiest possible way. Consequently, no orc in his right mind would go into the tunnel created by a shock attack gun. Gretchen, being brighter than the orcs and having a keen sense of personal safety, tend to disappear whenever the disturbing whine of a shock attack gun pierces the air. Snotlings, however, possess only an animal level of intelligence and aren't frightened of anything until it's too late. Along with the squigs, these snotlings are gathered up by the mech's operator and fired through the warp. During the journey, they are driven out of their tiny minds, and by the time they exit the hole, they are fighting like crazy to escape. As the mech does his best to place the exit hole in the exact location of the enemy soldiers, the warp-crazed snotlings emerge not so much into the ranks of the foe, but inside the foes themselves. The nightmarish journey through the twisted seas of unreality drives the snotlings into a frenzy, and they emerge scrambling, clawing, biting, and defecating uncontrollably, sometimes inside the enemy's armor. This can cause havoc in an enemy vehicle and catastrophic trauma to the enemy troops, making the shock attack gun one of the deadliest weapons in the orc arsenal. And those are just some of the most dementedly intelligent beings in all of Warhammer 40K lore. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, hit the thumbs up button. If you guys have any suggestions for other topics for a deep dive, let me know in the comment section below, or comment whatever you want. It really does help out the channel, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. This is Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.
Oh, I did the